All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you for checking out this conversation. It's one that I've been looking forward to. Two thought leaders are going to make the case for what opportunities lie ahead in hospitality. Are opportunities primarily in the digital world? Is that where we should be focusing? Or are they in the analog world? So I'll let our two guests for this debate introduce themselves. Simone, I'll pass it to you first. Tell us a little bit about yourself and tell us why opportunities ahead lie in a more digital version of hospitality.
So thank you so much for having me today. It's always a pleasure. So very, very short bio. Started working in the hospitality space 25 years ago. And I wanted to do something else completely. I wanted to be a philosophy professor of all things. And I said, what is the dumbest job I can get? And I said, let me go and work at a hotel. And it wasn't that dumb at the end. And that is why 25 years later, I'm still in the industry. But I always had a passion for technology and science fiction as well. It's all science fiction until it's science fact. So, but at some point, over the last few years, with more tech adoption, especially post COVID, what I say is perceived as a little less completely crazy, and some people start to think, okay, maybe it's crazy, but it's not so crazy. And so digital versus analog. So I think, so let me start with the fact that I don't like the premise of that. And just because I think that if we think on a binary scheme, we'll never get out of that, right? And I always say it's never digital versus physical, or it's never, AI versus human intelligence. It's always a combination of the two. And it's always been like that. Again, I will tell you a lot of philosophical stuff today. I can't, that's where I come from. But if you look back at 2,500 years ago, Plato was saying exactly the same thing. Plato was actually complaining about the invention of writing. And the case was, if we write stuff, we will forget stuff and our brains will become lazy. So to a certain extent, I think that technology is human. It's, if anything, more human than human. And that is why I think that thinking in terms of digital versus physical, or artificial versus human, or virtual versus IRL, or whatever you want to call it, it's something like a thought that we maybe need to overcome to a certain extent. And I always like to quote a philosopher that I love, that I actually had the pleasure to talk to. And that is David Chalmers, and he's always saying that in a few generations, the difference between digital or virtual and physical will be so slim that it would not make any sense to try to distinguish the two. So I'm a big advocate for, look, a lot of people think I live in the year 3000 or something, but I don't think in terms of digital and physical. It's just like reality to me.
Got it. Well, the leather jacket and the lighting, it makes you look like you're speaking from the future. So you got that going on. And look, I think at the end of the day, there's probably some combination. There's a role for each of these. But I think in this conversation, we're really going to lean into kind of where should we be investing, where should we be doubling down, because many of our listeners are looking for fresh, creative ways to serve their guests, to provide hospitality, and as they think about new ways to do that. They're making investment decisions. They're thinking about where do we focus our time and attention and money. And so you've written a lot about that, and appreciate that introduction. David, I'll pass it over to you to introduce yourself and make the case for why we should be focusing more on the analog side of things.
Yeah, thank you. My name is David Sachs. I'm a writer and journalist, speaker. I don't know what else I am. Human. In Toronto, Canada, I write on sort of business and culture, and I've been doing it for 2 decades. I also did a lot of travel writing. So while I've never worked in the travel business, I was a travel journalist for many years for New York magazines, for newspapers, for Condé Nast Traveler and others, and got all sorts of wonderful free trips and comps at beautiful hotels and crappy hotels all over the world. When I thought about sort of making the case, I immediately thought back to the last trip I did. And this was just before Christmas. My family, my parents, my wife, my kids, my brother, we did our kind of COVID makeup trip. We had a trip that we were going to do skiing in France for my mom's 70th birthday in March of 2020. Thankfully, we didn't go, and we had to use the credit. So we went to Colorado, to Breckenridge, for a week of skiing. And when I think back on every element of that trip, that are the things that were memorable and things that were enjoyable, they're all analog, human, real world physical experiences, right? The experience of visiting our friends outside Boulder and staying in their house and going for a walk in the freezing cold sunshine with my good friend Dan, who I hadn't seen in a couple of worlds, who's a big Web3 advocate and probably a fan of Simone's work. And having that conversation with him and having dinner with our kids who had never met, and just that like joyous hanging out and the hospitality of being in someone's house and staying with friends, which is a thing that's this almost irreplicable, magical thing of just that one day, and the pancake breakfast we had the next day before we parted ways. I think of the incredible ski instructor my daughter had at Breckenridge for a tremendous cost. It's just ridiculously overpriced there. But this guy, Chris, like truly lived it. And I'm someone who used to be a ski instructor in Whistler, and I worked in Australia, and I worked here in Canada. And this guy was incredible. Like, he took her to the top of the mountain, got her down bowls, just like got her thinking about skiing and loving it in a way that even as a kid who loves skiing, she was fired up every day to go on that mountain. I think about the feeling of the Colorado sun on my face. If you've never skied there, it either snows or it's sunny there. Like, there's no cloudy, there are not that many cloudy overcast days. Going up on the chairlift in the freezing cold at the beginning of a season, there wasn't the best snow condition. And then over the course of the week, it sort of snowed. And like, every moment I remember of that trip is this visceral feeling, the physical feeling of the conditions of my body, of the different runs we were going down, got to the point where the last morning we had to like book it to the airport. My brother and I went out and like skied our faces off because it had snowed a foot the night before. Steep technical lines, body aching, just like reveling in that. I remember the server. It was Christmas Eve. We're Jewish, so it doesn't really matter. But we were at the Denver airport. There was this one restaurant, which actually for an airport restaurant was one of the best meals ever. Like, they had wine, they had real glasses, they had proper menus. We had a great dinner, steak, salad, potatoes, good wine. And the server was so friendly and so hospitable, even though we were in an airport, like the opposite of every airport meal you would have had. All of these things were analog things. They were human relationships. They were physical spaces. There was the design of different spaces. It was the way that the young Argentinians who worked in the ski rental shop in the base of our lodge would like chat with us and joke with us each morning that they had just won the World Cup. So we were going on about it, right? All of these things are what added up to that feeling of hospitality. And the hospitality is, to me, in my own definition, feeling welcome as a human. Digital technology made a lot of that possible. It allowed us to look at the lodge we were going to stay at and book the ski lessons online and, arrange the rental car from Hertz or whoever we arranged it for, and plan the trip with Google Maps of how we were going to get to the mountain and these different elements. But I don't remember any of that technology. It was there in the background. It served its purpose, and the purpose was to bring me out into that world, into those relationships, into those spaces. That was the core of that hospitality. And that, to me, will be the future and is the present of what hospitality is. And that's the part we need to double down on investing in.
That's great, David. Simone, how would you respond?
Well, I will argue with the fact that I actually do remember the technology. And but mainly because I do remember when the technology fades, and I think that is a big problem that we have today. And as I told you, when I especially when I look at a very high touch industry like ours, because like everything David said, is I can at least to a certain extent relate to. Now the problem is that if we don't create an infrastructure where humans can focus on being humans, we will never get there. Okay, so the main problem to me is, again, and whenever we talk about tech or digital or virtual in the hospitality space, you always have this crazy paradox to me, and it looks like blasphemy to a certain extent for a lot of people. Okay, especially when you go like in the luxury space. Look, we don't want any level of digital or technology. Your self-checking apps, forget about it. You just forget about it, right? But then you start to look closer, and you understand that, and that's the beauty of being humans to me. We are so many different individuals with nuances, and not every guest is the same, and it doesn't have exactly the same expectation. And I think that this is a very important part that we're forgetting. And I think that part of that is because, and that is another paradox, when we're looking for staff in the hospitality space, we need people that can actually handle the technology, right? So we look for people that can actually use that PMS or use that booking engine or that channel manager, right? It needs to be fluent in Excel. It looks like, and you need to speak 3 languages. You look like you're trying to hire devs more than receptionists or front office managers. That's a problem, right? And this is where digital can actually help, because it can make everything that is not necessarily human just go away. And that's, to me, is the beauty. Like, think about a company like Uber, for example, okay? And it's very, a lot of people is completely against Uber for, whatever reason. But the beauty of Uber is that, like, all the logistics of riding in a cab just goes away. You click on a button, the guy shows up. I can write down, look, I don't want to talk, or I want to talk, or I want this music in my car. That's it. That is possible because of technology, right? And the experience is completely frictionless, and to an extent that when you go to a city where they actually don't have Uber, you need to go to a cab. You see the difference. You see the technology, because it's clunky. You just they don't accept your payment, and you need to get some cash. It's always a problem. So I think that this is my response to that we need to stop thinking in terms of black and white when it comes to digital and physical, because there is a big risk here that we're going to use humans to do the work of robots instead of taking humans to do the work of humans. And again, this is just, be me being me. But the fact is, I think that especially in the travel space, we're very anthropocentric in a way. We got this like anthropocentric myth. We are this fixation that we are at the center of the universe. We're not. Like, we're like 7.6 billion people. We're 0.01% of all living things on the planet. From a statistical standpoint, we're irrelevant. And so what you need to understand, that not all guests would like to have that human connection. And let me give you like an example, a personal example. It doesn't say much, but I think it's explanatory. Look, I go to the same hotel probably 6 times a year, right? And everybody knows me by now, and they know what I want. Usually when I travel for work, the first thing that I need to do is go to my room and be, okay? So the only thing I want to do is I want to go to my room as fast as possible. That is always me, okay? You see me in every check-in, that's me. Now this guy, he checked me in like probably at this point, I don't know, 50 times, okay? And he always goes back to that, welcome, Mr. Puorto, what I can do for you, and it's a Wi-Fi password and whatever, because this is what they thought at school, at the business school, and said, look, you need to treat the guests like kings. No, sometimes I want to be treated like just somebody who wants to go straight to the room. And this is my argument. It's great to have humans, but sometimes you don't want humans. And like if you go to a supermarket, for example, and you can choose between, like waiting in line in front of 5 old people, and or just go and self-checkout, I probably self-checkout. I don't care. I don't recognize that job as something made for humans. My dad will never go to the self-checkout the place, okay? So to me, it's all about giving a choice, okay? And understanding that we all different humans, we all have different needs, and we all have different social skills. Like, you know me a little, I don't have that. Like, you start talking to me in the morning at breakfast, I just go away. I don't know what to say, you know?
So we all want different things, right? We all want different things. We want choices. And I think David, I want to give kind of you a chance to respond to that. Maybe kind of talk a little bit about kind of what we want out of travel. You mentioned, working as a travel writer before. You mentioned some of your own experiences, experiencing personal hospitality, your family experiencing some travel. So I want to give you a space to respond to Simone, but also would love to touch on, what do we want as humans from travel?
That's a really good question. And I think, echoing what Simone says, I mean, humans are not monolithic. We're not binary, right? Each one of us is different. We have different experiences and different things that we want when we go out of the house, whether it's travel or whether it's to, say, a restaurant, right? Some people want the bare bones, minimum, fastest, most convenient thing. They do not want to talk to another human being. They want to go to McDonald's and have everything ordered from an app and go pick it up and not have anyone talk to them. And other people want it to become this sort of social hub. I am the opposite of Simone. I am like, ooh, tell me, that's me, right? And what the industry needs to do, and where it does it best, is gauging what each guest wants through not technology necessarily, but the sort of human powers of empathy and understanding, which is when it works best is effective, and when it's poorly done and poorly trained, can be off or annoying.
David, can I ask you to explain that just a little bit more? Because I think Simone's example of Uber, things working in the background, in general, yes, we just want things to function. But I think specifically to that point of discerning, what does a guest want? It sounds like you're making the case for that's a human distinction. Is that right? And if so, why?
Well, I think, first of all, I 100% agree with Simone when he talks about something like Uber or, airline booking software or any sort of software. Like, I want that to work. I want to show up and I want them to know who I am and what it is and what the information is and when I'm going and, all of that stuff in the back end. That's the guts of it. Like, that's the software. That's the digital. Give me the most advanced version of that. Right. But the problem is when it becomes that the digital and the software and the sort of infrastructure bleeds into the elements where the human experience is sort of central, right? The example I cite most often, and I freaking hate more than anything, is the QR code menu, right? It came in at the beginning of the pandemic. It's existed for a while. It came in at the beginning of the pandemic as this like knee jerk, oh my God, the menus are going to give us COVID. And like the scientists are like, no, the menus aren't going to give us COVID. But every restaurant's like, well, out of an abundance of caution. And to this day, there's not a week that goes by where I'm like, hey, is there a menu? And they're like, oh yeah, it's just point your phone at this little thing. Or you have to order through your phone, even though I'm a human being server standing here in this restaurant. And so now I have to spend 5 minutes, trying to get it to work and scrolling through a tiny shrunken PDF or entering my credit card information like I'm ordering something online, like I'm ordering Uber Eats or Grubhub or whatever while I'm in a restaurant. And what does that do? It detracts from this notion of hospitality that I want. And the hospitality for me, I'm speaking to my own, in my own experience, is when you go somewhere outside of your own home, which is where you're going for hospitality, right? There's not much hospitality that happens within your own home. So you're going outside, you're going to a restaurant in Rome or here in Toronto or in San Francisco, Josiah. You're traveling somewhere, whether it's like Michigan for work or somewhere sexy like Rome or San Francisco, right? What do you want? You want that feeling of being welcomed. You want the feeling that you are seen as another human being, that you are valued as that human being, that your desires, whether it's to have a conversation or just get to your room and go take a piss, like, are acknowledged. And where technology works great is when that it facilitates that through the information that's needed through the transaction. But often what happens is it steers that interaction into an area where it's like, no. The system has been built that you need to pull your phone out and scan the menu, and then you need to order it and do it on this. And you are now doing the work. And there's nothing less hospitable than entering your freaking credit card information in a restaurant so you can pay when you just want to give them your credit card, or you just want to look at a menu and say, I would like the chicken, and could you do it with this sauce instead of this sauce? And often that's because software has certain demands and limitations, and it doesn't have as much flexibility as a human being does. And so when we train people and say, no, this is the standard we're doing, everyone must use the system, or in a way, here is our standard of how you have to greet each guest. And they're saying, well, I have to go through the checklist of everything to ask this person, even though I can see him standing there with his legs crossed, jumping up and down in the hotel. And this happens every time because he drank a lot of water in the Uber that was complimentarily given to him in his Uber drive, right? We are making the human experience, the hospitality experience, programmatic. And we are removing sort of the human aspect of empathy and interaction and making it inhospitable. And so that's where I see that differentiation, where it's like, no, this is better. Someone has told us the system is better. It's more efficient. This is what guests want. And yet there I am begging for a paper menu because it's just so much better in my personal experience.
So Simone, I'd love to get your response to that. And we could stay with that example of ordering on a menu, or more broadly speaking, what is the case for using more digitally enabled processes or technology or software in some of these interactions that David was explaining?
Okay, sorry, I'm smiling because I think in my head I see me and David at a restaurant. This will be like just super crazy. First of all, I love QR code menus. To me, it's like they're amazing. Well, first of all, like if you want to be like all Greta Thunberg here from an environmental point of view, that's great. When I started working in hospitality, I started in mice, right? So there was a lot of F&B involved, and the pain of reprinting the menu like every single day, just in terms of like the paper you create, it's just crazy. Okay, so to me, like as we see, just soap and shampoo in dispenser now instead of little bottles, and we think, okay, that's great for the environment. I think that to a certain extent we should look at QR code the same way as well, even though I do understand like the beauty of touching the paper, good menu, and sometimes they're so good and the design is so well done that you just steal them. I do understand that, but again, it's why are we? To me, the main point that I don't understand is that why are we arguing about how guests want to live that experience? And look, I'm a music freak, okay? You know that. And to me, it's always, and I have this friend, like it's a vinyl collector, like probably, 25,000 vinyls in his house. And every time I go, we go through this crazy long period of time where we listen to music for like 6 hours in a row, and it's great. And but that to me is like when I want that experience, I go to that friend. Buy a good bottle of wine, sit down, we take some beautiful free jazz records, we put it on a good vinyl, we sit down, we listen to music. But with Spotify, for example, that for a lot of people is blasphemy. I can engage with new bands that I didn't know, and maybe get in touch with them directly. And the algorithm sometimes gives me some great advice. So I don't think it's it's this against this. It's just we got two different take, and maybe even the same person. That's the example. The same person at a different time of the day can have a different habit. Like I wake up in the morning. And usually, and I sleep with my headphones on. Okay, so basically, I wake up with music, and that's Spotify. And it goes Spotify like all day long. And then I have a break, and then maybe I take my vinyl and I listen to music, and it's still me. But then I go fully analog at some point, But it's still me. So the cool thing to me, and this is I think where hospitality is losing is losing the human connection, and that is strange coming from me, is that they cannot see that, and I think a big part of the problem is that, let's be honest, this is a very underpaid job, and I teach a lot of MBAs, and like I see these numbers, like 70% of people studying at these amazing schools, they end up in some other industry, not just because it's your career is better, the money's better. It's an underpaid job for a lot of requests. You need to talk like multiple languages, know multiple softwares, have soft skills. It's not very easy. So I can understand that to a certain extent. So my point is, let's try to make sure that at least there is a level of technology that can help these poor guys, because I would love as well to have this experience where I sit down and they come with this beautiful menu and, they explain me all the dishes and I can talk and blah, blah, blah. But it doesn't happen every day, okay? And let me give you an example. So usually on average, I travel probably 100, 120 nights a year, okay? And I've been doing this for the last probably 10 years, except for the 2 years of COVID. So, it's probably 1,000 room nights. Average stay of 2 nights is 500 check-ins. I don't remember one single good one. The only one I do remember, though, is a non-check-in. So I will not tell you the company, but so I came in, served a check-in kiosk, and I, just put my passport and my credit card. And the guy came to me and said, "Look," and he looked at me for a second, and I think he understood. He said, "Look, I can do 2 things for you." He said, "I can either check you in or check in yourself, and I go grab a beer for us." And I said, "Well, look at me. I check in, get a beer." So I checked in. I did a beer. So I sit down with the guy. We had probably a couple of beers, and he told me more about the company and the hotel and what to do in the around. And to me, that was an icebreaker because, okay, look, you kind of understood me. You understand that I don't want this very old-fashioned way of doing hospitality that is very overwhelming. But you just understood me, And this was possible because of technology. Because without technology, you had to do that check-in for me. Well, at the end of the story, I spent so much money on that hotel, ancillary revenue. I ate there, and I had a couple of drinks with this guy, and I paid for those, So it was great. It was a great experience. Look, but it's the only one I do remember. And I do remember that because technology was able to free up the people to do what people should do when it's requested.
Right.
I don't know if it makes sense.
It's a good story. David, I want to go to you. I think it's a good story. I think where we're probably in agreement is the value of those human interactions, right? So the person who offered you a beer, right? I think
that you then paid for. That's just a scam, Simone.
You got to make money. But I think our kind of purpose of this conversation isn't necessarily to predict the future, but it's to think about kind of what changes should we make today to prepare ourselves for the future. And as we sit in this moment, I know, David, you don't spend all your time working in hospitality, but there's a decent amount of companies and people that are pretty focused on technology and hospitality. I think it's probably a laggard among other industries. But I guess my question for you, David, would be, in the experiences that you have with hotels, is your sense that hotels should be investing more into technology, or if they should be spending those dollars investing in maybe people or or training or some of the more analog aspects of hospitality? Simone, I'll pose the question to you after, but David, I'd like you to take that one first. Where should we be investing our money and time right now?
I'm going to reflect back on what Simone said, which is it needs to be parallel, right? The more money you invest in technology to facilitate transactions, certain interactions, back-end things, aspects of management, the more you then need to make sort of counter investments or equivalent investments in upping the human parts, upping the training of the human interaction when and where that's going to be the most valuable and the most necessary, right? So you're going to, let's say, augment or replace certain things, the check-in or the payment process that could be automated, or the ordering of certain things, right? And so, okay, then what are the parts where you want in a hotel or a restaurant or an airport, let's say, where you actually want those human interactions to be? Where do you identify where that is? Now, do you just leave them as they are? Or do you say, okay, now how can we improve these things now that these people's time and effort has been freed up to do more greeting, to do more interaction, to offer drinks to guests, to lead tours, to do that? And I think I agree with Simone. Like the either or of like, no, we have to invest everything in AI. This is it. This is the way, the things going. You're just going to, if you don't make the equivalent or sort of complementary investment in the other half of things, then you're going to fall behind. And I think the same goes in the other way. Like, you could train your staff all you want, but if the industry and the guests are demanding, digital services or digital infrastructure that meets them with, let's say, payment, for example, then you're going to fall behind as well. But it has to be this thing in parallel. And I think where people and businesses especially get it wrong is they say, well, we've been told, we went to this talk and someone said that the future of the industry is digital. So like, this is where all our investments are. Everything's going to be cashierless. And what they found, the supermarket example that you talked about, Simone, earlier is a great one. Like, they found that like their places got rid of cashiers and just did automated checkout. It worked. It physically worked, the money worked or whatever, but they were losing a certain amount of customers over time. And many of these chains like HEB, which is a huge supermarket chain in Texas, and then I read about a Dutch one recently, like they actually reinstituted sort of human checkouts because maybe it was older consumers, maybe it was lonelier consumers. There was a desire for that. There was a desire from a functional level of just like, hey, people are stealing a lot more stuff because there's no checkout here. Or we're losing X number of bananas because, nobody's weighing them properly, to sort of that social element of it, right? We're increasingly in an age defined by loneliness and isolation, which is one of the biggest public health crises of our time. And automated technologies that remove humans from interacting with each other, even for transactional reasons, doesn't assist that as a byproduct. And so I think it is realizing that, it's complementary. It's not this either or thing. And you need to balance those investments instead of seeing it as the zero sum game.
Right. And so if you're just focused on technology, there's investments that have to be made on the human side. And David, in an earlier conversation, we were talking about how this probably cuts across generations, right? And so some of the conversation of what does Gen Z want here might be a little bit misguided. I'm a millennial, and I would say probably 50-50 in places I have options, go do the self checkout, or I go talk to a person at my grocery store, has those options, and I'm kind of split. So it's not necessarily a generational thing where it's the older people want this.
Well, let's talk about airports and flying, right? Which is like a necessary means to get somewhere, wherever it is you're going. I'm not like calling up a travel agency and asking for a paper ticket because I'm the analog guy. I'm like, book it online. I get my, boarding pass on this thing. Go to the airport, do my online check-in in the kiosk, hand my bag to a thing or roll it on because I'm not an idiot. But like, when things aren't working, I want that person there. And I don't just want a person who's like, oh, well, you can call this number, or, oh, well, here's our chat bot. I'm like, my flight is leaving in an hour. I am stressed. I have children with me now. That's like a worst case scenario. This thing is not working, or this thing isn't doing the thing, or the passport thing isn't scanning my documents correctly. Can you as a human realize that in this situation, I as a human am stressed out and need help? And if the standard is like, well, you'll have to call a call center, you'll have to use our chatbot, or we can't do it. That's, again, that inequivalency of like, we made all this digital investment, but like, if it doesn't work, or it's never going to work perfectly because it's just travel, it's reality, it's airlines, right? Or there's weather or something like that. you want that human part. You want that human part to make you, to solve the problem, but you also want it to be like, no, you are seen. We understand what you're going through. We empathize with you versus like, you are just a data point. You're a data point that can give us money. And if
David,
things aren't working, it's your fault, or it's out of our hands, or, talk to the chatbot.
Right. So I'm hearing from you, David, make investments across guest experience in both the people, the analog side of things, and the digital. But it's an investment into guest experience. Simone, I want to go to you. A lot of hotels are making investments in both of these areas. You've worked at a hotel company, that you advise hotels. From your perspective, do you feel most hotels should be investing more on the digital side of things? Or kind of where do you feel the kind of gap or the lack of investment is right now for most hotels?
So let me answer differently. Okay. So have you ever watched the movie Grand Hotel Budapest? You know which movie I'm talking about. There is this quote that always resonates with me. It says, what is a lobby boy? A lobby boy is the guy that knows what guests want before they even know they want. And it says the lobby boy is always in sight, but it's always invisible. Now, if you replace the word lobby boy with digital or technology or AI or whatever, that works too. So good technology works when it's totally invisible, okay? And that is where I see the future of hospitality. Because let's put it differently. I think we still give, that's the binary thinking. I think we still think in terms of this is made by humans, so it's better. That's not always the case. Like, let me tell you something. I still see to this day, believe it or not. I live in Europe now, right? So it's we're probably in the 50s for a lot of stuff. But anyway, a lot of hotels are still manually charging credit cards every single time you get a reservation. Now, let's do the math together. So let's say you got a small boutique hotel in Paris or whatever, okay? And you got, 20 reservations per day. So let's say it takes 5 minutes to charge a credit card. Even more like the credit card is wrong and you need to get data from booking.com again and so forth. So let's say it's fair to say that it's 2 hours of human work that will not give any extra value to the guest, okay? Now, should you invest in the technology? Hell yeah. But you don't have to invest in the technology. Like, if you invest in the technology, you're saving so much money because the cost of a payment gateway compared to the cost of the time of that human and what that human could do. And this could even be just sit down and relax for a couple of months. Like a receptionist is still a very stressful job. Give this guy a break. And you should invest in technology. On top of that, that's the problem because today when I started in 98, 99, my first job as a hotelier, and I was a receptionist, as I told you. And back in the day, there was no technology at all, especially like independent hotels in Italy, forget about it. Everything was done on pen and paper. But it took a lot of time, okay? So we didn't even have appearance. Now, if you can get to a level that everything that you can do with tech, and the guest will not feel the experience as diminished in a way, you should go with that, okay? You should not even think about that. Innovation for the sake of innovation is BS. Just forget about that. Unless it's a marketing stunt. I got clients that come to me and say, look, I want to be seen as the most innovative hotel in the industry. Okay, cool. Let's do all the crazy things. Let's go on the central end. Let's do NFT loyalty programs, whatever. But that's a marketing stuff still, okay? And on top of that, technology. I think it's something we always forget. And I agree with David that a lot of this BS comes from like industry experts talking, and they say, "Look, the future is all digital." And look, if you come to me with that, it's like the conversation is over. If you come to me and say, "Look, I know that I know," it's over. And I'm a Socratic when it comes to that. I know that I don't know, but the main thing is that let's make sure that we invest where technology can actually help our second guest, because we always have two guests. Remember that. the guests that come to our door, and the other guest is our staff. Okay, that is very precious, especially now. I don't know what's the situation in Canada, for example, but in Europe, it's extremely difficult to find people after the pandemic. Good people. Now the problem is that when you get somebody in the hospitality space, you don't need only people that is good with people. And that's the essence. It's on the word hospitality. You need people that is good with people, but it's good with technology as well. And that is because most technology is clunky. So it does not connect, like you got a PMS that is not connected to the channel manager. So you need to download the reservation and put it in the PMS. So you need to understand the PMS. Now, let's say that all this technology works like magic, like behind the curtain, like the Uber case I gave. You can just take people that is good with people. You don't know how to open an Excel file? I don't freaking care. You're good with people. You're the next one. Okay? So we can, for all I care, as long as technology is good, you can even hire Anish. They cannot use technology. It's fine. Technology will take care of technology itself. I don't really care about that. And so that's the problem. So should we invest in technology? Yes, but we should invest in good technology. And I don't want to be too technical here, but forget about the legacy systems. Just go with open API systems. Just make sure the systems talk to each other. We don't have silos. We can free up people. And best case scenario, these people will be less stressed and will be better with guests. Because never forget that. But this is something interesting I was reading the other day, and I can give you the source after the live recording if I don't remember off the top of my mind. But the study said that 57% of negative experiences in hotels were due to human staff. So it was not like, okay, the water is not working or whatever. It's because of the staff. And usually this is not because the staff is not good. It's because they're freaking overworked. And they're overworked because they need to take care of a lot of technology that work in silos. Now you need to fix that. So you need to invest in technology. Make sure that you invest in the right technology. Or
there's multiple stakeholders there.
Yeah,
multiple stakeholders.
Many.
No, it's a good example, something to keep in mind for sure. I know we're close to the top of time here, but I would love to just spend a moment for each of you. Any closing remarks, advice for the hoteliers that are listening, the hospitality providers that are listening, in terms of what they should be thinking about now for preparing for what's ahead, where they should be investing, what they should be doing. David, I'll go to you first, and then Simone.
Sure. I mean, one is that there's tremendous change afoot, that new technologies, artificial intelligence, virtual reality, whatever else Simone is investing in, is coming, and it will have impacts in the hospitality industry, as it's had in every industry. And the reality of it is, you need to invest in it. You need to think in it. You need to test these things out and see where it's right and where it doesn't work for you. But more than that, we still have to recenter ourselves around the reality of, like, hospitality is a human business. It's not a data center. It's not a moving of widgets or, something like blockchain technology where it's like, various bits of data and various bits of money moving around. It is a human-centered business based around that human experience, and actually based around a pleasurable human experience. And as long as that's the case, and as long as it's humans that are traveling and not some sort of like AI that's your guest, which, low profit margins on AI guests. They don't buy the beer when you offer it to them. As long as that's happening, then any future that we're going into is going to be no different than the present of hospitality and the past of hospitality, which is like the guest, the experience of that individual throughout the entire process is the core of what everything is about. And how do you best serve that to make it a positive and pleasurable experience? Using technology in the way that Simone just so eloquently put it, and using those human aspects of hospitality, that the empathy, the feeling, the thoughtfulness, to go back to Grand Budapest Hotel and Ray Fiennes' character, I'm not servicing old ladies, but but that the sort of the charm right? The doing what you can to make someone feel as though they're welcome, whether they're popping into your place for a coffee or a drink for, 5 minutes, whether it's Starbucks or something, or whether they're staying at some, super high-end luxury lodge or property, where, they expect their toenails to be clipped the second they walk in. Those things aren't going to be any different tomorrow, or 10 years or 100 years from now, as long as it's humans and their bodies and their very human needs, being at the sort of center of that. And I think that's something that we have to sort of keep our eye on and remember, as new technologies come and go.
That's great. David, Simone, over to you. Closing remarks.
Let me close with a quote from one of my favorite writers, and that's Douglas Adams, the guy from The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, right? And so in 1999, he wrote an essay, but it was titled "How to Stop Worrying and Learn to Love the Internet." It's very interesting to read it today, like 20, 25 years later. And he said, "Look, I came up with my own theory of technology. Like all the technology that is created since the day you're born and when you're 15 is normal. All the technology that is created between your 15 and 35 is new, is exciting. You can probably even create a career out of it. But all the technology that is created after you're 35 is unnatural." Now, I did the math, and I actually did the math, and statistically speaking, the average age for a hotel general manager is 44. Now, if I go with Douglas Adams, all the technology is unnatural. So I think, again, it goes back to, look at technology with an open mind. It's not like, don't believe the gurus that tells you that everything will be ChatGPT or the metaverse or whatever. And I am the one telling you that. So, I wish that would be like that, but it will not be like that very soon. And just make sure that you approach technology with an open mind and without thinking that is unnatural. Now, technology for the sake of technology doesn't make sense unless you really want to be perceived as an innovative brand. But don't underestimate technology that can actually make your life better. Because as I always say, all the technologies that make the life of humans better will be adopted, no matter what. This can be the iPhone, the metaverse, blockchain, the wheel, fire, whatever. If it makes your life easier, that technology will be adopted and mainstream adopted.
That's great. And I think that is a common thread throughout our conversation here. How do we use anything that we do, whether it's technology, whether it's training, whether it's time spent with our staff, with our guests, to make them feel welcome, make their lives easier, make their lives better. And that's why we are in the hospitality business. Thank you both. This has been a great conversation, and look forward to chatting again soon.